at all.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I'm pleased to speak in support of the bill and to acknowledge, as the previous speaker did, the work that the member for Fenner has done on this issue over a period of time, considering first the kinds of changes that were needed, how they might be framed, and advocating for them in the media and in the public domain. And it was good that the member for Cowper acknowledged that work. I mean, it would be good if we could do that a bit more often in this place. There are a lot of things that the Parliament achieves through collaborative effort in the committee process, and we probably don't draw attention to that enough, and that contributes to the view that people have that we all just sort of shout at each other and don't apply ourselves always in the best spirit for the purpose that we're here to serve, which is to improve things for the women and men of Australia. But this is an important change because it essentially takes away to describe it as a monopoly is right up to a point, but it's probably better to describe it as a sort of a ineffective and obstructive kind of vertical integration, because you essentially have a situation where car manufacturers and related dealers controlled access to information that was necessary to allow vehicles to be repaired, and they denied the ability for independent repairers to undertake that work. And the best way to understand that actually is in a quote from a member of the industry, who, in speaking about this some time ago, said the following, and I quote: "The modern motor vehicle is just basically a computer on wheels. Even simple things like changing a tyre, changing a component on that vehicle, checking the oil level and what have you is all now computerised. And the car companies are controlling the computer gateway into and out of the vehicle and how you communicate with that vehicle. And at the moment, they're shutting independent local mechanics out. It started off with intermittent issues on older vehicles, but as each model year has come out, the situation is getting more and more dire. Our industry are having to use workarounds. Sometimes it might take them 4 or 5 hours to find the information for an issue they should have got in 10, 15 minutes. There's a loss of productivity and a loss of profitability. And as the previous member, the member for Cowper, said, in some cases it probably has resulted in people just not getting their cars repaired. And that would have been particularly the case in rural and regional areas where access to a large dealership just might not be possible. So you've got your local business in country or rural or regional Australia and you want to get your car repaired there, but you can't, because the critical information and the computerised data and various gateways, as just described, are denied to those businesses. So it absolutely makes sense that we now change from what was a failed experiment of a voluntary arrangement. There was a voluntary arrangement that this government wanted to try back from 2014. It didn't work, as those kinds of voluntary arrangements generally don't. And there's no natural encouragement for big business that have seized for themselves a competitive advantage and are making more money as a result and squeezing out competitors as a result. There's no natural imperative for them to want to change that. So if you ask them nicely or leave it to some sort of voluntary arrangement, nothing will really change. It's time that we made the change mandatory, and that's what this bill achieves. Who does it benefit? Well, of course it benefits the 23,000 businesses around Australia that operate as independent motor vehicle maintenance outfits and repairers. It supports the 150,000 plus workers that are engaged in that sector, but it ultimately really benefits Australian consumers and Australian households, because it means that car owners have more choice when it comes to getting their car repaired or maintained. And it is a matter of choice. It's a matter of a fair, open and competitive market. And I'd go a little bit further than that, in fact, in saying that there's an argument when it comes to the kind of vertical integration that this bill takes away the sort of exclusivity of that vertical integration. There's an argument to be said that we actually want motor vehicles to be looked at by independent repairers, people who don't have a vested interest in the way that that particular make and model of car works. And we know in the area of motor vehicle products, like lots of products, that they're designed to be fit for purpose, but that's not always the case. And we sometimes find that the airbag doesn't work, or the brakes don't work, or something else doesn't work. And in the case of a motor vehicle, if that's the reality, the likely outcome is someone's going to get very badly hurt. And I know that the dealers that are associated with manufacturers would undertake their service and their repair obligations with the utmost seriousness. I know that that's the case. But it's actually healthy to have a sort of a service ecosystem that includes lots of independent repairers who maybe might, on some occasions, just be a little bit quicker to pick up on those kinds of inherent faults that need to be addressed on a larger basis. And that's just a matter of having a system that works with some better checks and balances than it might if the only people who are repairing and maintaining cars are the people who are also selling them, and essentially depend for their profits and their livelihood on those vehicles being seen as being problem-free. So I think that's another benefit that this bill will deliver. It bears saying, I think, in this issue that properly effective and fair markets don't naturally occur. It's a mistake that we make too often, and it's a view that some people would like us to have, that markets are a bit like the law of gravity or other kind of natural laws, that they exist without human influence, and the best thing we can do is just let them get on with their inner workings. Markets are created by us. They are something that human beings have brought into existence, and they only work well for the ends that we need them to deliver if we take an active interest in how they're operating. The reality is that if you want fair, open and competitive markets, you need to have carefully, rigorously and properly oversighted markets, because participants in a market don't necessarily, as individual entities, have an interest in those things. I mean, if you're a market participant, you actually would rather get larger, you would rather have fewer competitors, you would rather dominate the area that you're in, because there are a whole series of advantages that come from that. And so that's what happens. You get people in whatever market it is, they try to grow, they try to outdo their competitors and swallow them up if they can and get bigger and bigger and bigger. But when that happens, all the things that are supposed to help markets deliver efficient outcomes get taken away, because you end up with, as in so many areas of Australian life, essentially two big players, and they reach a relatively comfortable accommodation where they can maximise their own interests, which are not often the same as the interests of ordinary women and men in Australia. So, this is a case in point. Of course, car manufacturers and the dealerships that they operate and then the services that they provide would rather keep that all in-house. They'd rather make that part of their large vertically integrated business. It allows them to control the product, it allows them to control price. That's not in the interests of ordinary women and men in Australia. And that's why we need this market intervention that comes along and says, you don't get to achieve that market power and inflict that market ineffectiveness or inefficiency on all of us. We're not going to have that. You need to provide that information on a fair, open basis so we can have proper competition, so the market does what we need it to do. And you will be paid fairly for that, because that's how the bill works. You have to provide the information and you'll be paid fairly for it. But then independent operators get to service vehicles of people right around Australia, particularly in rural and regional Australia, and they get to have the benefits of that. That market issue does lead on to this sort of broader issue, which is termed the right to repair. And in a way, this piece of legislation is the first of what I hope will be more instances of government stepping in and seeking to provide an expanded right to repair, because there are a range of reasons why that should be the case. There's a consumer interest in it. We can't have a situation where companies decide to design a product in such a way that the only choice a consumer has is to buy it, use it until it fails, and then buy another one. That cannot be the way that the consumer world works. We cannot allow producers to design their products and then to operate in a way where that's the outcome. Planned obsolescence on the one hand,
Right.
and then the requirement to simply go and buy a new one because the battery's dead. You can't replace the battery's now died. Surprise, surprise, the battery was only ever going to last 18 months. Probably could have been designed to last longer, but 18 months is what the sort of focus group testing tells them people will be prepared to tolerate, and then you have to go and buy a new one. We can't allow that to happen. It's not fair to consumers, but it's also not sustainable in every sense. It's not sustainable for our environment. We can't have a situation where we just have a linear economy of using raw materials to make products to throw away into landfill or burn, or they end up in the ocean. We can't have that in terms of the environmental impact, but in fact, we can't have it from the point of view of resource sustainability. There's just not a limitless amount of stuff in the world. You know, we need to use the materials that are there at a time when the population is very large, continues to grow, and the resource consumption per capita continues to grow. So it's not some I don't know, weird left alarmist statement to say that if we keep going on the path that we're on, we're going to hit a brick wall, or we're going to run off a cliff, because there just simply logically is not more and more and more and more of everything in the way that we're using it and wasting it. So the broader concept of the right to repair fits within some of my responsibilities as a Shadow Assistant Minister for the Environment in terms of waste and recycling, because at the top of that hierarchy is that you reduce waste in the first place. So you design goods so that you don't throw them away if you don't have to, that you use them as long as possible by repairing them as much as possible, by making sure they're designed to be repaired, that manufacturers are obliged to consider that in their design process, make sure that there are parts available and there are processes through which things within an object that are likely to wear out, that might only represent a tiny proportion of the thing itself, can be replaced, rather than being designed that when that one little thing comes to the end of its functional life, that the whole thing, the other 98% of that material, just gets thrown away. We need to ensure that sort of product stewardship gets stronger, and then we need to enable the opportunities for all the other kind of businesses and waste and resource management participants to be part of ensuring that we waste less, we reuse more, we recycle as much as we can of those things that can't either be repurposed, repaired or reused, and then are only left at the end of all of that with the barest minimum residual waste. And then, obviously there are going to be some things that perhaps by their hazardous nature or other aspects, we may need to consider something like waste to energy. But that should be for the tiniest residue of the productive process. And this fits into that. So it's really welcome to see this happen. It's disappointing that it's taken so long. The voluntary arrangement was entered into in 2014. It was acknowledged in 2017. The Productivity Commission began to have a look at it in 2017 and said the voluntary arrangement's not working. The dealers and manufacturers are not cooperating. Independent businesses, including businesses in my electorate of Fremantle, are not being given access to the information they need to repair cars for ordinary Australian citizens. And then in 2018, thanks to the work of the member for Fenner and others on this side of the House, there was a commitment to making the change that we now see. But that was in 2018. It is now 2021, and this won't be introduced until the 1st of July. So it's, we'd like to see that things like this, which are ultimately being done in a way that we all, I think, agree on both sides of the House, it would be nice to see if the issue and the solution could be seen clearly earlier, and we could make the kind of progress that this bill represents without the 7-year delay that has occurred between 2014 and now. And I would like to see the principles at the heart of this bill around the right to repair considered more carefully in future, and we look at other ways in which we can ensure that we have a much more sustainable approach to resource use and a fairer approach to consumer rights. Thank Thank you, Deputy Speaker.